Thomas Malthus calculated that if every trout, say, had 100 or so offspring and so on and so forth throughout the generations, that we'd be knee-deep in trout in just a few decades. How would you respond to that?
I'd respond to that by saying that most of the eggs are destroyed or eaten so that the numbers remain stable. That's the beauty of God's plan.
It doesn't strike you as an exceedingly wasteful plan, these myriad lives created only to be immediately extinguished?
Like providing food for others.
Cheese and cucumber.
Thousands, John. Thousands dies that only a few may live. Is not the general sum total of happiness in some sort of massive deficit?
Charles, it is really not my duty to speculate on the mind of God. But it does seem to me that nature is at peace.
There is another view, that all of nature is a battlefield. Remind me where I read that.
Very good.
Good.
A good movie about Charles Darwin with A-list talent is well overdue. After all, Darwin came up with not just the greatest scientific idea ever, but probably the greatest idea in the history of thought, the theory of evolution by natural selection, that all life forms begin with common ancestors that change slowly over time as traits that help them survive in their environment are passed down and amplified over generations. It's an idea so powerful, so all-encompassing, that it shook the way humans looked at themselves, their place on the planet, their relationship with their gods, and whether their gods existed at all. And it continues to do so nearly 150 years since it was first published in Darwin's book On the Origin of Species. So I was pretty happy when I heard about the movie Creation, with a script by the writer of Master and Commander and starring Paul Bettany and Jennifer Connelly. So does Creation do justice to Darwin and his revolutionary idea? It pains me to say this, but it doesn't. Not by a long shot. Let's find out why. Paul Bettany, who played a Darwin-like character in Master and Commander, plays Darwin, with Jennifer Connelly, Bettany's wife in real life, as Darwin's wife Emma, who ironically was also his first cousin. The movie begins with Darwin having already formulated his theory of natural selection after 20 years of careful research, but reluctant to write it down and publish it. Something that might surprise a lot of evolution deniers is that Darwin was not some angry atheist out to kill God, but had been devoutly Christian for much of his life and was deeply concerned about the potential loss of faith and social upheaval that might be caused by his theory, which effectively overturned the prevailing notion that God had created all life in the form it exists now, and had created humans specially in his own image. This presents a real problem for creation. While it's challenging to make scientific research appear interesting in a movie, it's even harder to make a book not being written and published interesting, especially when you know that's what eventually happens. So Creation, which actually has little to do with the creation of anything, turns Darwin into a tortured artist, racked by nightmares, hallucinations, and guilt, as he attempts to bottle his scientific muse. On one side are his scientist allies, who are enthralled by the power and elegance of Darwin's theory, its potential to kill Christianity and validate science, and are pressuring him to publish it. On the other side are his wife, who's deeply religious and fears for Darwin's soul, and a local reverend who condemns Darwin's apparent loss of faith. But the film devotes the most time to the illness and eventual death of Darwin's favorite daughter, Annie, who shared his love for science. This serves as a good reminder that even in the 19th century, when Darwin was coming up with the greatest scientific idea ever, people of his time, including himself, were still extremely ignorant when it came to science, especially medicine, where we see Annie's sickness treated by dousing her with cold water and giving her poisons like mercury. Haunted by Annie's ghost, that's right, a ghost, Darwin struggles to decipher if Annie's blaming him for her death or trying to tell him something else. Now, I come from a family of scientists and think that evolution really is the greatest idea ever thought and the best testament to the power and beauty of science. So I really wanted to like this movie and hoped it would show evolution deniers and the rest of the anti-science crowd how the theory came about as well as the human side of the man who created it. But instead, the science of natural selection is mostly relegated to a few voiceovers and flashbacks, to the point that people who don't understand evolution may not understand it any better from watching the movie. So all that's left is basically a Victorian melodrama without the bodice ripping, about a tortured writer who fights with his wife, a ghost, and himself over science and religion instead of grieving for his dead child. So if you want to learn about Darwin and how he figured out evolution, you're probably best finding a good documentary or a book, or better yet, just looking at and thinking about the natural world. Because in the end, the theory of evolution by natural selection and the scientific process by which Darwin discovered it is more exciting, mind-blowing, and transformational than even the best movie could ever be. I'm Jonathan Kim, and this is a ReThink Review.